Hello, my name is Jillian Gregory. I'm the Director of Testing, Research, and Evaluation for Leon County Schools. This year, the FCAT will be administered during the month of April, followed by end-of-course assessments in U.S. History, Biology 1, Algebra 1, Geometry, and new this year, Civics. The district would like to share important procedures to ensure that all students are tested in the proper standardized manner. This video should be viewed by all test administrators and proctors associated with these tests. In general, all Florida public school students must be administered the FCAT appropriate for their grade level and the appropriate end-of-course assessments. There are a limited number of ESE students whose educational plan indicate that they would take the Florida Alternate Assessment, or ELL students who should take the SELA instead of the Florida FCAT reading. Here are some important facts about this year's tests. The FCAT schedule varies by grade, but all Leon County schools should begin administration of the appropriate FCAT on the same day. The daily FCAT schedule should be adhered to throughout each school. Computer-based tests, including end-of-course assessments, must be administered within the appropriate window. As you can see on the calendar, this year's FCAT begins on April 7th for high school students needing to retake the FCAT. Retakes must end by April 15th. Monday, April 14th for middle schools, and Monday, April 21st for elementary and high schools. Some tests end on May 2nd, and the testing window runs through May 7th. Please check your testing calendar to ensure that you are following the appropriate dates for your school type. The daily session schedule may differ from previous years. All information has been distributed to your test coordinator at your school site. As always, please make sure that you have a copy of your school's daily testing schedule. As I previously mentioned, state end-of-course assessments administered this year include exams in U.S. History, Biology 1, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Civics. The test window will vary at each school. All students finishing those courses during the 13-14 school year should take the appropriate test. In addition, some students may need to take these retake tests, as they have not yet achieved a passing score. This may include students transferring from other states, private, and homeschool. Students taking retakes and end-of-course assessments may receive additional time to complete the test. This should not be interpreted that students have unlimited time. They must be applying themselves to finishing the test. The FCAT is administered as a computer-based test for the following grades: grades 6 through 10 reading, new this year are grade 6 and grade 8 reading, grade 5 math, new this year grade 6 math. All end-of-course assessments are also computer-based. Exceptions are made for ESE students with the appropriate documented accommodation. The policies and procedures for these exceptional circumstances and test administration are found in the FCAT Computer-Based Test Administration Manual. Your school test coordinator is responsible for distributing this information to the appropriate personnel. As a reminder, in general, each school must schedule computer-based tests so there are sufficient computers for all students to complete the FCAT and end-of-course assessments within each administration window. Science reference sheets are not provided for grade 5. Math reference sheets are provided for grades 5 through 8 and for those retaking FCAT 1.0 mathematics in high school. A periodic table of elements is provided for grade 8 science. FCAT 2.0 rulers are provided for use only in session 2 of grades 3 and 4 math. Students are required to read and sign a testing rule acknowledgement prior to taking each test. However, refusal to sign this does not excuse the student from taking a test. New to the acknowledgement test form includes language regarding communication safeguards. In general, it reads, "You may not discuss the test items with anyone. This includes any type of electronic communication, such as texting, emailing, or posting online, for example, to websites like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram." Schools must administer the appropriate computer practice tests called an EPAT to all students who are taking a computer-based test. If a student has previously participated in an EPAT for a previous subject in a prior year or earlier in this test year, he or she is not required to participate in an EPAT for each administration. Sample tests are provided for students not testing on the computer. Every person involved in administering the FCAT or handling FCAT materials must carefully read the FCAT Administration and Security Agreement, which emphasizes the importance of proper training and possible consequences of test administration irregularities. In addition, test administrators must sign a Test Administration Prohibited Activities Agreement indicating they understand what are considered prohibited activities. The test administrator's certification number must be recorded appropriately. These documents should be signed and forwarded to the school test coordinator. All test administrators must be certified educators. Non-certified personnel may serve as proctors. Let's take a moment and address the test administrator activities during the FCAT. The most important things to remember during the FCAT are to read the appropriate FCAT script verbatim and to provide adequate proctoring of the exam in an appropriate testing environment. These are important for successful and fair test administration. Achieving this is best accomplished by circulating through the room during the test to ensure the proper testing procedures are being followed. The administration manual states that it is not appropriate for test administrators to use phones, grade papers, or work on the computer during testing. You may encourage students to continue working or to review their work. It is allowable to remind the class to make sure they are on the right section of the test and item on the answer sheet. This should not be interpreted as pointing out to a student he or she is answering the wrong question on the answer sheet. The test administrator cannot give advice nor give any interpretation regarding specific items on the FCAT. If a student does ask a question about the FCAT beyond general directions regarding taking the test or about a specific FCAT item, the test administrator is allowed only to give general encouragement. For example, do the best you can. If a student insists that an item is incorrect, has no correct or two correct possible answers, the test administrator should inform the school test coordinator so this may be noted on the school coordinator comment form. You may assure the students that if there is actually an error, the item will not be counted. This brings us to an often asked question. What kind of responses are teachers allowed to give a student if he or she asks about an FCAT item? The 2014 FCAT administration manuals describe test security policies and procedures. One of the prohibited activities is reading the passages or test items before, during, or after testing. Therefore, except for specific accommodations for certain ESE students, no teacher or school administrator is allowed to read any FCAT item. Test administrators must allow the exact amount of time allocated for each FCAT testing session. That amount of time can be found in a handout your school test coordinator received from the district. A session may not be ended early, even if students indicate they have finished. When a break is provided in the schedule, it is only to be a stand and stretch break with no interaction between students. During the break, students' answer sheets should be inserted into test books, which should be closed. If students need to use the restroom during the test, only one student of each gender can be allowed at a time. These students do not receive additional time on FCAT tests to complete the test session. Although the end-of-course assessments are timed, students may have additional time if they need it. All test administrators are expected to review the 2014 FCAT 2.0 end-of-course assessment and/or computer-based test administration manuals for the appropriate subjects and grades. The days of the test are very busy. Some might say a little hectic. We strongly encourage each test administrator review the manual prior to these testing days. If you are a test administrator of ESE or ELL students, it is especially important that you are aware of the proper test accommodations for each student. These accommodations can be found in a student's IEP or LEP plan. All allowable accommodations must be offered to the student. No additional accommodations may be given. If a student is in a grade that is a computer-based test and needs the accommodation of a paper-pencil test administration, that accommodation should be specifically noted on the student's IEP. It is also important that a student has had experience with the accommodation or accommodations during his or her classroom instruction. For example, if a student has a paper and pencil accommodation for a computer-based test, this should be based on the fact the student does not use or seldom uses a computer during normal classroom activities. Each testing room should be free of distractions, have comfortable seating, sufficient workspace, and good lighting and ventilation. Students should not be facing each other when at a table and should not be able to easily view other students' answers. Students should be seated at least 3 feet apart. If there is any concern, physical barriers should be placed between students. Use of physical barriers may be of particular importance during the administration of computer-based tests. In addition, prior to the test, administrators should remove or cover all visual aids displayed in the room. Test administrators are required to maintain an accurate seating chart for each testing group of students. During the test, make sure that students clear their desks except for the appropriate test materials. Students should use only No. 2 pencils. The student may not use books, notes, or scratch paper, and must not talk or make any disturbance as he or she works independently. The test materials allowed by grade can be found in the administration manual. Note, for certain grades, students do have access to calculators, reference sheets, and folders. Test books may not be returned to students after they have been collected. Test items are not to be discussed with students even after the test has been collected and materials have been returned. Any missing materials or test irregularities must be communicated with the school test coordinator as soon as possible. A test irregularity is a departure from the standardized testing procedures outlined by the FCAT or end-of-course test administration manual. For example, allotting too little or too much time to take a test, or administering a section out of order. The purpose of any test invalidation is to identify when the validity of the test has been compromised. This decision is made only after a discussion with the district director of testing. A test must be invalidated for any of the following circumstances. A student has an electronic device during the testing session, or the student is cheating. During the testing, a test may be invalidated under the following circumstances. A student becomes ill and is unable to finish the test. The student is allowed an incorrect amount of time. A student is not given the proper accommodation. A student is disruptive during testing. A student works in the wrong testing session. Or an error occurs in the test administration that could compromise the validity of the test. The Florida Department of Education and Leon County Schools have a very strict policy concerning the possession of electronic devices during any FCAT or EOC testing session. Page 6 of the FCAT Test Administration Manual states, if a student is found to be in possession of any electronic device during testing or during a break, his or her test must be invalidated. Students and parents and guardians must be made aware of this policy prior to testing. By using the phrase during testing, we mean any time after an FCAT book has been distributed to students. This includes any break within a test session. If an electronic device is within a student's possession during the test session, but this fact was not discovered until after the session has ended, this is still cause for a test invalidation. Electronic device is defined as any that can receive, transmit, record, and/or calculate, except for the approved four-function calculator. The best way for a school to avoid students having electronic devices in their possession is to collect them prior to the test session and put them in the front of the classroom and to adequately proctor the entire test. To set a consistent example for our students, test administrators should not use electronic devices during the FCAT sessions. With regard to test security, an inappropriate action by school or district personnel before, during, or after the FCAT administration may result in consequences such as test invalidations and/or loss of teaching certification. The state of Florida has contracted with a company called Cavion. This company is charged with the task of analyzing students' results to identify extremely unusual behavior with the potential of an unfair advantage in taking a test. The three types of unusual behavior they will be identifying are very high similarity among pairs or groups of test takers, very unusual number of erasures, particularly wrong to right, and very substantial gains or losses from one test to another. The state feels that possible causes of extremely high similarity of responses are answer and copying, test coaching, proxy test taking, and/or collusion. Therefore, when student responses are identified as having a very high similarity of answers, the threshold is 1 in a trillion, the student's results will be withheld awaiting an investigation by the district. This investigation should include all test administrators and students involved. No student-level scores will be withheld based on erasure analysis or gains analysis. However, A flagged school will lead to a district review. This could mean that a school's grade will be withheld awaiting that review. To conclude with some common problems, please make sure that all test administrators read verbatim the correct and complete script found in the FCAT EOC test administration manuals. For FCAT reading, math, and science, by grade and subject scripts, the script for the computer-based FCAT as well as the end-of-course assessments can be found in separate administration manuals. The best way to avoid mistakes is to review the manuals prior to the day of testing. Perhaps the most common mistake during the FCAT has been for a student to inappropriately go from one test session to another. They do this by ignoring or not seeing the stop sign visible at the bottom of the designated pages. Good proctoring will help avoid this, but if a student still does so, the school test coordinator should contact our office at 487-7833. Calculators and reference sheets can only be used for FCAT math and science at designated grade levels. If it is used by students at other grade levels, this is a reason for invalidation. The security of all test materials must be maintained before, during, and after test administrations. If any secure test materials cannot be accounted for after an initial search, please inform your school test coordinator as soon as possible. This is the essential information Leon County Schools wanted to share with all FCAT and end-of-course test administrators. Other important information will be shared during your school's official FCAT training. Thank you for your attention. Have a good day and good luck during testing.